The mine will pay compensation resulting out of the loss of this communal land.
Okay.
Remember, the DMR would have granted the mine
I want to also ask you around, and now that we've talked about, or rather you've opened up the discussion around how the land is negatively impacted when a mining company comes on to do the land. There's a level of degradation that happens, right? In fact, by level, I'm putting it lightly, there's serious degradation of land that actually happens when a mining company starts to do mining activities. And I want to talk a little bit around the degradation of the land and environmental impact that it has. Can you perhaps take us through, what damages or environmental damages that mining operations can cause to land? Talk about water pollution, deforestation, soil erosion, and so forth. What responsibility does the mine have in this particular situation?
Well, again, as earlier stated, back to the Constitution.
Right.
Section 24.
You like the Constitution, eh?
Well, it's the supreme law, and that's where it starts.
Indeed.
If you miss it there, going down would not come right.
Correct.
We've got the right, in terms of Section 24, to an environment that is healthy, and we've got the right to protect this environment.
Mm-hmm.
NEMA comes with Section 28 of also reinforcing that constitutional right.
Okay.
To say, when you pollute, you must remedy. That is called the polluter pays principle.
Okay. Polluter?
Pays principle.
Okay, so the polluter must pay for...
Correct.
Aha.
So the Constitution is the ceiling, then NEMA, then underneath the NEMA, we've got several sectoral specific legislations.
Okay.
For instance, Air Quality Act, Water Act, Biodiversity Act, Heritage Resources Act, and the likes.
Okay.
Underneath all of each sectoral specific legislations, for instance, when the mine, be it underground or open cast, which is far west, is going to create dust.
Yeah.
It's going to pollute the air.
Yes.
There are minimum standards that the mine must comply with. If there's water there, the National Water Act, the Water Use Act, also prescribes its own. If there's biodiversity that is going to be impacted by the mine, there are prescribed regulations that the mine must follow. So all in all, the mine has to use its expertise and budget to make sure that it complies.
Okay.
If it fails, for instance, Section 54 of the Mine Health Safety Act give those that are affected a right to go to the Chief Inspector of Mines, who can issue a stoppage instruction.
Okay.
Section 55, the Inspector of Mines can issue a fine
To the mines.
to the mines
Okay.
who now cause this negative impact.
Correct.
They may be, in case of fatality, again taken to the NPA, where there's going to be inquest and what cost. But furthermore, under the NEMA and this sectoral specific legislation, the company itself, the company directors, the company management, the independent consultants that are engaged by the mining companies may be fined or imprisoned, or both, should they breach these environmental rights that are guaranteed from the Constitution.
Brilliant. I want us to stay on the Constitution giving rights to, communities, and now drill down into individuals. If I am living in a community, a mining community, and I happen to have children, and, the pollution that you've just talked about, that is obviously catered for by many pieces of legislation, understandably so.
Yes.
But, now my child starts having respiratory issues when they never had them before, let's say before the mine arrived on site. now my other children have skin ailments, for example, and other health problems that come with, inhaling, polluted air, pollutants that are sitting in the air, water that might not be of the best quality, caused by activities in the mines. What rights then would I have as an individual and my children suffering this level of or the impact that the mining activities are having on my children's health? What rights do I have and what recourse do I have to be able to get it right?
Well, it's skewed in the sense that we see the mine as the giant.
Okay.
Because they'll have the money to engage the top lawyers and top experts to push back against that child, family, and the rest of the village. But they've got the right. And we've got law clinics, we've got institutions, be it universities, even the legal aid, who would take on a mandate and represent that child.
Okay.
Now, you can bring an application to interdict the mine from causing the negative impacts to the environment.
Interdict means to stop the mines, right?
Right.
Great.
You can lay a claim for personal damages.
Okay.
Now, you would need an expert report, a scientific report that would say, here is the chest, here is the eye problems, here is the skin, and the direct cause is caused by these mine operations.
Okay.
That will be a delictual claim. We've had the cases, even the mine workers themselves, with the Manganye case, where there will be negligence and they can be sued. Even the descendants, or what would that mine leave behind, the widow and the children.
Yes.
So they can claim. So that's how it would work. They've got the recourse of going to the courts. But as I was saying earlier on, we would also want to involve the DMR through the Chief Inspector of Mines, who would say, this is the causes, a Section 54 to stop. Now, once a Section 54 is issued against the mine, they must stop the operation or section of that mine that is causing this. It can only be uplifted with written representations and assurance that this that is being complained about is not going to be repeated, or a fine in terms of Section 55, or if people have died at the mines, you can also prosecute the mine, the mine management, and the directors. So that will be that recourse. But beyond that, it calls for education. Unfortunately, it will call for budgetary terms, money, that the community must, knowledge is power.
Indeed.
They need to be alert, the mining communities, of their rights and how they can stand up. For instance, the mines would start small, but they will expand. We've got the DMRE relocation and resettlement guidelines. We've got the International Finance Corporation principles that says when you, as a mine, would want to relocate and resettle a community, maybe because of your blasting. If you blast at a mine, there's rock flies.
Correct.
Destroy and break the house that are nearby windows, even cars. We've got those cases. There will be dust. There will be vibration. The houses will crack. People become ill. Chest and eyesight. There comes a point where the solution is not about litigation, because you would sue the mine, you can get the compensation, but the next morning they blast. So one of the solutions is find a way of relocating and resettling the community elsewhere. Okay. Right? So, but now with the dawn of democracy, we're not in the past regime where the mine will bulldoze the community and dump them somewhere. There must be a proper negotiation. There must be housing. There must be compensation. And in some instances, the very same mine will even create a trust, a legacy trust that would say, we're removing here, but we're going to restore your livelihood where you would be. You go to the mining villages. Those people work and earn money at these mines. they've built beautiful houses.
They have.
It's not the tin-roomed or rundavels of the past, right? You go to the northwest, around Rustenburg. You go to Limpopo, houses in villages close to the mines, beautiful houses. Now, it's painful for those people to see those houses being demolished and cracking and full of dust, windows breaked. The mine has to come with a budget because they are the triggers of this.
Correct.
You relocate, you resettle these communities in a proper and dignified manner. So there will be that interdicts, there will be damages, but relocation and resettlement also stand as a solution.
I see. That's very interesting because I think we don't hear a lot around relocating, especially because of the importance that we've just talked about around land. And taking it a step backwards, hindsight would have been important at that point in time for the community to also realize the impact that these mines would be having to their very livelihoods, the lives that they've built for themselves, the houses that they've built for themselves, hoping that they would carry on into the next generations, but only to find that with these mining activities, their plans personally would need to change because they need to be relocated elsewhere. So I guess that's the kind of balancing act that needs to happen when mining communities start considering whether or not mines need to come into a particular place. They need to have that mining savvy, so to speak, to be able to have the right level of education to ask the right type of questions during the PPP process.
Yeah, look, amongst them during that public participation process, now that we know, the communal land would belong to the community. Amongst the solutions is that they will have a surface use lease agreement.
Okay.
Where the mine will pay compensation resulting out of the loss of this communal land.
Okay.
Remember, the DMR would have granted the mine right to mine what is underneath. The community would then bargain for a surface use that the mine will pay, a compensation. That's one thing. But remember, the communities have this direct connection with the land. As you were saying when we started, it is difficult for them to forgo the land and be relocated and resettled elsewhere. In some instances, and it happens, you also have graves there.
Correct.
I've seen families in other regions of Limpopo where they even bury their loved ones inside their yard. That's how our African people are connected to the land.
Correct.
So there will be that kind of resistance. Now there's competition between the mine and the landowners in a communal way. But once they've got the right to mine, it becomes a negotiated exercise to say, out of the mine, what will be the benefits?
True.
Economic, we all prosper, but let's strike a balance.
Correct. Brilliant. I think I like the idea of striking a balance because I think mines also bring an economic growth in communities. I think we shouldn't also forget that. But while we are on degradation, let's talk about water resources. Water is becoming slowly but surely, in fact, it's probably escalated at this point. It's becoming a scarce resource, right? And water becoming a scarce resource, I can imagine that when water becomes polluted, maybe due to negligence or due to, ordinary day-to-day activities of a mine, when there are pollutants in the water, there are heavy metals in the water, that is definitely having a negative impact on the community as a whole. Whatever they do on top of their land, whether they are doing their subsistence farming, whether they are using that land for their own purposes, household, domestic purposes, and so forth, it really has a far-reaching impact if you have water pollution happening, because it also has an impact on the future generations who are going to have access to those water resources in that particular area. And you've already talked about the various pieces of acts that actually I guess, monitor the activities of mines, not to get to a point where they are, polluting water, such a scarce resource such as water. Can you perhaps take us through the process around protecting a scarce resource, a resource that would need to be used by future generations so that the current generations don't become the scapegoats or don't get blamed for any, negative impact that this activity that they have consented to then would have on future generations? How can we strike that balance around preserving heritage and also preserving land resources outside of or without, being at loggerheads with the mine company itself?
Yeah, look, now looking at water, which, as you rightfully say, it's a scarce resource. There are various activities at the mine operation, such as draining underground water out to the surface, which would be ordinarily acidic, or using water for your mineral processing at the plants, or directing your water for recycling at the tailing dams, the mine tailing dams.
Okay.
This kind of activities trigger or has become a listed activity, which triggers Section 21 of the Water Use Act.
Okay.
If you look at Section 21 of the Water Use Act, you'll have A to K, right? List different water use activities which would require a water use license.
Wow.
Now, the mine has to look at this A to K and look at the activities. If the activities are listed amongst A to K, they are not allowed to carry that activity without a water use license that they would obtain at the Department of Water and Sanitation.
Right.
Should it turns out that they are using water unlawful, again, there may be a directive from the department that would say to the mine, you stop and you cease doing this. There may be a fine. There may be imprisonment for the directors or the management or the environmental consultants agent that the mine has engaged, or both imprisonment or a fine. Those are the kind of rights that the community would have if their water resources are being polluted, right? So a mine would not be allowed to do anything with water that is against the Constitution, right to environment, NEMA to protect, and the Water Use Act, Section 21 Water Use Licenses.
Wow, that is really going far and wide to actually try and make sure that we protect such resources. I mean, having to get a license for every one of those activities that the mines are, I think the law is actually doing well to try and strike a balance between the economic benefits that mines bring and the economic, or the heritage benefit that the communities have as a right that is inherent to them as the owners of the land. That's all we have for this segment. Thank you for tuning in to Mamolao. Please don't forget to subscribe and click on the notification bell for more of this educational legal content. Make sure that you comment, guys. I want to hear from you. And also ask questions, because I want to hear those too. And